elite school, Fred Weigel, and our class, our seventh grade class, was the last class to go there, and then in '66, the official integration actually happened. So therefore, I started a new life that I guess was no longer going to be sheltered anymore because of the integration and everyone merging together. So I went to school at Radford High School. Didn't have any problems. Got along with everyone. There were situations that came up, but as far as brutal violences or anything like that, I think a lot of that happened more in Pulaski County and Montgomery County. Radford was, I always say, different. That's all there is to it. Radford was always totally different. People got along. A lot of the men worked together at the pipe shop and the railroad, and a lot of my family members cleaned house. I cleaned house till I finished nursing school. And the white and black families pretty much got along together. You know, there wasn't very many problems, and they stayed tight, and we still are. We really still are. I take great pride in being here in Radford because of the relationship. And I want all of you to know that how I feel about you will never ever change. I will always love you. I will always love the city of Radford. I will always love what Radford has. Like I said, it's had problems, but Radford does pretty much take care of business when things come up and everything. So I didn't know a whole lot of what to say or what you wanted to really hear. But sometimes I think that if there's any type of negativity that ends up in Radford, I think it's from people who have come into Radford from other places that have been into racial issues and everything. Because a lot of it never really was in the city of Radford. I was thinking before I came in, I said, oh gosh, they're thinking about Confederate names, Confederate statues and things like that. And I said, oh my goodness, Radford is named after a Confederate person. John Blair Radford was in the Confederacy. You have the Ingalls that were in the Confederacy. The whole city of Radford was Confederate, which brings into when I first started Radford High School and they had the band, they had the rebel uniforms for the band. Yeah. And that created a really rift. So they started changing the band uniforms and everything. But Radford was Confederate. In fact, you know, Virginia was, regardless. So Virginia was Confederate. Everywhere was Confederate. Montgomery County, Blacksburg, everywhere. So, you know, it's your number one Confederate state. So I don't exactly have a whole lot to say because, like I told Kent, I said I can only speak for me. I can't speak for other Black people here in Radford. And sometimes they don't think the way I do. I'm an oddball. And I'm just one of these, I like to confront the positive first, but if you make me see negative, then it's negative. But until then, it's positive. I always want to work with people. I always want to share. I always want to help people and what I always want to do. But as far as what's going on now, it's so totally mind-boggling. And I was thinking in terms of the riots and marches and protests that they're having. When they were talking about some of the looting and everything and the burning that was going on, what made me think was when they started talking about the Tulsa race massacre. I don't know if you all have heard about it here lately. And white people went in and just burned up the whole city and killed about 300 Blacks. So before integration came about, that was the Black person's life, was fear. I wasn't told to be fearful when I was growing up because my grandparents and all were never afraid. I mean, Black and white always got together. But in that era, as I study more, that was the life, and even now, it's still the life of the Black people until something gets done about it. Not everybody's bad, but I just don't understand how all of this continued to escalate after segregation ended. And I was looking at my children and I said, why is this still happening? Because my children, my daughter's 43, my son is 40. We're talking about 43 to 40 years of integration or more, that this should not even be happening because they've always gone to school together. So why are we still having this problem of people not being able to get along? And why this confusion? What's really going on? So I'm just kind of mind boggled about some of it, like you all are. So I would like to hear from you all of what you feel and the questions or thoughts that you all have about all of this. Well, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Let me suggest, folks, that if you would like to ask Sarah a question or make a comment, that you each one individually turn your mute off so that you can speak. And then when you finish, turn it back on again if you would. Does that sound good? So we'll open the floor and you can ask questions or make comments at this point.
Sarah?
Yes. Hey.
It's me, Mary Ann. You are always so positive, so I'm not surprised at what you are saying. But let me ask you, in lifetime though, even though you felt sheltered sort of in Radford, have you ever witnessed racism of any kind that you could share with us so we kind of know, what we're talking about, or what you're up against or may have been up against, or you have seen other people be up against when it comes to racism?
I've never, per se, personally, I guess, experienced any racism, but I do know that when I was at Radford High School, there was a controversy about the song Dixie. That was a big issue because the band were playing. They were playing it as a pep song, and I never gave it any thought until it was brought to my attention. So some of the Blacks, and I went to it, they had a meeting, and so when they had pep rally, when they played Dixie, all of us was going to walk out. So they played it. Everybody got up, got ready to walked on out, but I couldn't do it. And I said, oh gosh, what in the world is wrong with me? To be honest with you, my feet wouldn't move. It's like I was paralyzed, and it's like something said, what are you going to accomplish? It's just a song. They can't put you back in slavery. They can't do anything to you. And so I never did walk out. Well, some didn't quite like it, but they didn't understand. I didn't get up because I didn't want to. I didn't get up because my feet wouldn't move. It was just like I was paralyzed, like something was holding me there. So that's one of the segregated problems that I saw then. But other than knowing that my parents, they couldn't go to the theaters unless they were in the balcony. See, the people who were born in the 50s came in on part of our mother and father and grandchildren's era, but we also had to transition into the new era. So we had to mold and shape the integration era. I always call us the official integration groups. So the things that my parents experienced, I was too young to experience it other than being born with the hair, lip, and cleft palate and having to go to Richmond for surgeries and things. I do remember the colored bathrooms. I do remember the colored water fountains. So I do remember bits and pieces of that before it got, demolished. So does that answer your question?
It does.
Yeah. Okay, Ted, I believe you were wanting to ask something.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make a statement about something that Sarah said, and regarding Radford itself. I mean, we're not from here, but we got here as quick as we could, and since we've been here, we really think, and it's probably the people that we go to church with have influenced us quite a bit. But you all are such a lovely group. I think it kind of reflects on Radford too. And Sarah stated that when she was growing up, Radford didn't seem to have too much trouble. There was some stuff going on, and I think they're, just about everywhere. Some places were worse than others. But she made a statement about if there was any sort of trouble, a lot of times it seemed to be people from outside of Radford. And I think that's what we're seeing today. All the stuff that's been going on for the last week and a half, there's been an awful lot of peaceful protesting and good groups and gathering. And but when the lights go out, it gets dark at night. I think the riffraff comes out, the troublemakers that really just aren't trying. I mean, I don't think they have an agenda other than to loot and pillage. They're just taking advantage of the situation, and it's a shame because I think there are a lot of good. There's a lot of good communication going on now, and I just hope it gains more forward momentum, and I hope it I hope it pays off this time, because we've been doing this for a long time, and it would be nice to really accomplish something.
Sarah, this is Kay Dunlap,
And
it's so good to have you with us. And as Mary Ann said, you're so positive. And I think your positive attitude must have come from your parents, because you said you never heard them talk about any of this to an extent at home. And as one who taught in primarily Black majority school districts, I taught in Suffolk for a total of 9 years, back the very beginning of integration. And then I taught again in the 80s. And then I taught in Norfolk in an inner city school for 18 years and had many Black students of all kinds. And some were very bitter and some were just absolutely wonderful. And I felt in the occasions that when I talked with their parents, when they did come to school, I could pick up a lot of the problems that the students were having based on the conversations with the parents, and some of their attitudes that came across. So I think seems to me, very fortunate. And I wonder if in growing up, did you ever stop to think about the fact that there were did you play with dolls?
yeah,
Did you ever stop to think about that all the dolls were white, or most of them were?
I guess in growing up, I don't even know how to describe this. Mentally, I guess you never thought of anything like that. You just thought that's the way it was. I think black dolls didn't really come into the picture, so to speak, to play with. Um, I guess a little bit before my daughter's time.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, the only black dolls that I always knew about, I mean, didn't know about, but learned about, were the black cloth dolls that were made during slavery time. And
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a doll that's called the topsy-turvy doll.
Oh, yeah.
The black doll on one side and the white doll on the other. And my understanding that the little white children of slave owners really wanted to play with the black doll. So they made the topsy-turvy one. So when the white child and the black kid was playing and they were playing with the black doll, then if the parent come in, the way my understanding, they would flip the doll over so it would look like it was the white doll. So, you know, and it's called the topsy-turvy doll. But as far as anything like that, you know, I don't know if it was a mental mindset that as you're growing up, that's just the way things were. I mean, you were too young to even know anything was really actually going on. Like I said, nothing really came to me until I started high school.
Uh-huh.
That's when the white people entered into my psyche and into my life, because other than that, I never was around any white people, just my family.
Oh.
Because you had your segregated communities. Rock Road was one of them, and West Street was, and whites were in the middle, other than if your parents were working for them or whatever. But I never was exposed to white people until I got older. Because everybody's in their own pocket there, and that was it, you know. Rock Road, I was looking up a census in 1920, and they called Rock Road Negro Town because they had their own stores, their own tennis court, their own roller skating rink. My mother and them would tell me about all of this. So it's like they were their own little separate town, their own stores and everything, and along with the whites. And so, like I said, it wasn't until I got older then you started experiencing some of these. I used to clean house for the widows, and I babysat all the time. Probably doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs kids. But it was after I got older and in high school that I was able to be exposed to more whites and situations that were going on. But as far as black dolls, no, there weren't any, but we did play with dolls. I had a Thumbelina doll, so, you know, my mom didn't like it, but, you know.
And I remember students referring to the fact that, or I've read about black students and black people noticing, of course, on television back in the 50s, almost no black people, but there were some black entertainers that people loved in the 50s. But as far as advertisements and things like that, it was all white. And also, I have a theory that, as I was saying, some of the students were very bitter, and it seems to me that builds up over generations. Norfolk had, as you may remember from studying history, had quite a time with massive resistance in the late 50s. The school that I taught at in the 50s was closed because black students tried to enter. And in Norfolk, there was what was called the lost class of 59 because the schools were closed and those students could not graduate that year. They had to go live with relatives, or I don't know, the state made some kind of arrangements, but I think there was leftover bitterness. And sometimes I wonder, as I see all the riots and the even the peaceful protests and what happened with George Floyd, it was like this was just the final straw with some people. Things had been building up over generations, and many other incidents that have occurred between black police and white police and Black people being arrested or in some way assaulted. So anyway, that's just my thinking on it. But you obviously, you've not let that happen with you. And you also, I believe, are of Indian, Native American heritage, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Um,
Omaha is 57.
and that is, that's another whole issue. Look what happened to Native Americans as a result of white people coming in this part of Virginia. And yet you have not let it make a bitter person out of you. And I think that's the result of your Christianity as much as anything. Maybe it's your personality, but we thank you for that. But we need to feel we need to look at what the other side is feeling, what Black people feel. I think I've taught them, I've been with them a lot, but I'm not sure I understand yet what it must mean and how it must feel at times to be Black. And I'm trying to.
I'm dealing with 3 races, Black, white, and Indian.
Yeah.
So I always have this saying, if I talk about a white person, I'm talking about myself. If I talk about an Indian, I'm talking about myself. And if I'm talking about somebody Black, I'm talking about myself. So I don't know if I'm supposed to be prejudiced against anybody. I'm just a world within this body. But I think a lot of the situation is that when integration happened and as it was progressing on, if things had stopped, then I think we'd be okay, but it's still escalating.
Yeah.
It's not stopped, it keeps going, but it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I feel as long as the whites go in denial that slavery ever happened or that there are ever problems, it's never going to get solved until the reality of accepting that it did and still does exist. You can't solve a problem unless you lay the cards on the table.
Absolutely.
Sarah, I think the prevalence of everybody having their own video camera on their phone now has helped us to see for ourselves what we have heard but couldn't really believe was true. But now that we see it for ourselves with our own eyes, you can't deny it anymore. I think that's made a big difference in the growing awareness right now. And I also think about the fact that what I'm reading is that the vast majority of protests are peaceful. More than 90% are peaceful, but that's not newsworthy. It's the ones where you have flames and violence that the news media all flock to, and that's what gets promoted. But that's a distortion of what's happening, it seems to me. But I'd really like to hear what your thoughts are on these protests, and maybe in particular, local protests that seem to be largely white people. How do you feel about that? Is that a good thing, or is that something else?
I think it's a good thing because it's proven those that have accepted that it does exist. And then they're able to maybe talk to other people and tell them, you know, it does. We believe it. We know it happens, you know. I've always been one of these type of people that I don't see prejudice unless you make me see it. And so if I'm with my white friends or whatever, I don't see it unless they tell me they see it. And when they tell me they see it, then that's when I know it's there. Because I want them to see it. I see it. But when they start telling me, Sarah, I believe this is this, and I say, really? And they say yes, then I know they saw it. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I think so, yes. Oh, Claire? Don't forget you've got to turn your mute off.
If I can remember, 3 quick things. One, Nina, your brother Jim Garrison, when he lived in Farmville, and I know this through a real convoluted way, you all may remember in your history books that Farmville High School in, I'm going to say 66, 67, chose to, the white children at Farmville High School went to Prince Edward Academy because they didn't want to be integrated. So I talked about, I had a friend, Melody McClung, who was a student then, and that's in the history books. So, and I remember talking to Jim about that, and he was a pastor or associate pastor someplace in Farmville at that time. And number two, Sarah mentioned that maybe Pulaski County and Montgomery County had more issues. Many of you know Joe Reed. He passed away a year ago, but I was fortunate enough to be assistant principal with him at Pulaski Middle for many years. And I guess he graduated high school in 66, and he graduated from Christiansburg Institute because even though Pulaski County was integrated, Black athletes weren't allowed to participate in sports. So Joe was an outstanding football player and needed to go to college on an athlete scholarship. So he graduated Christiansburg Institute and didn't get to go to Pulaski. And then number three, I consider myself fairly well-read, and I'm ashamed. I had never, ever heard of the massacre at Greenwood in Oklahoma in the 20s until this week. How many of you all knew? I mean, I'm sure Grace knew, yeah. How did we not know that? I'm ashamed of myself. I'm ashamed of my history books. We never knew.
And I listened to a Cooperative Baptist Fellowship podcast while I was mowing Friday, and both of the podcasters live in Oklahoma, in Norman, Oklahoma, and they said that they grew up and never heard of this until recently themselves. It was never talked about in public schools there among the whites. So,
Right.
I'd like to ask Sarah.
When we were doing the Trail of Tears of the Blacks and was traveling it from Alexandria to Stanton, to Roanoke, to Radford, to Abington. In Roanoke, they were talking about they were at the place or the area where they did lynching. They lynched a lot of the blacks and everything. And then in the Discovery magazine from Roanoke Times, there was a killing right in Roanoke. This black man got accused of something about a white lady that didn't happen. And so the sheriff was able to get him and put him into the jail, but a white mob came and shot the sheriff in the foot or something like that, and got the man and hung him, shot him, and burned him. So that was one of the ways that they killed some of the blacks, or either the clans always would do hangings, but they always burned black people's homes too. So the burning and all of that and the killing actually was started by the white man after slavery and during slavery, because there is also this thing about bucking, where the homosexual slave master would do something to a young black buck, but they call it sagging. And they would sodomize him and everything just so that some of the others would know that they mean business. Or either they would cut if they ran away or stole, they would cut their hands off or mutilate them in some kind of way. So all of this actually, if you think mentally, the black man never did it until after slavery was over with, because it had been done to them. And then even after slavery, it didn't escalate to killing anybody or mobbing or rioting till the civil rights. And that was when the bigger riots started happening, and it seems that it never stopped. after that. And especially when Martin Luther King got killed. So nothing has stopped. It's just escalated. And it gets worse and worse and worse. And I have trouble comprehending why. Just like I saw the video tonight on the news of the Brooks man that showed the policeman after he shot him, it shows him going over there and kicking him. I don't get it. You're on camera. That goes to show how bad things are, that people are willing to still do things and know that they're being seen. But their mentality is, they'll never do anything to me. I'm a policeman.
Yeah, no accountability.
Whether you're a black or white policeman, that's the mentality that they have. But I grew up with policemen that if somebody was drunk, everybody knew everybody. So if a black man was drunk, they took him home. That's how Radford was. They didn't always think about arresting every time something comes up. And most of the white people knew your family, the blacks knew the whites knew the blacks, and everybody. But policemen never did that when I was growing up. You could stand it. We would walk to Hyde's ice cream store. You never worried about a policeman driving by to see if you were in trouble. So I just don't know what happened.
John, you were going to ask a question a minute ago. Or is that Doug? I can't see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was Doug.
Yeah, let me just get a quick question in here. The massacre and the burning of the community out in Tulsa has been mentioned. Sarah mentioned it. And then it sounds like that most of us learned about this 2 days ago, probably. That was my first exposure. Kent mentioned it, and Claire. But when and how did you learn, Sarah, about the massacre?
Just this couple of weeks. It got stirred up when Trump was getting ready to go to Tulsa. And that's when I heard about it, and they were trying to warn him into not doing that. So he's going to do his rally on the 20th and not on the 19th. So that's when I heard about it. I imagine that if we were to actually start digging some more, it's a whole lot more that we still don't know about that have happened.
Yeah, there's a lot.
They didn't have.
Apparently, there was no arrest ever made.
No arrests ever made.
No, there weren't any.
Yes, John.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of the carpetbagger here, the ultimate outsider. I'm an Army brat, and so through my life, I moved in and out of segregated situations. I played football and baseball and everything in integrated situations in Germany. And we came back to the States. My best friend was a black kid. We were going to stand American football on its ear. Got to Fayetteville. I went to the white school. He went to the black high school. I can remember horrifying an aunt in Miami when I was in elementary school. In Miami, there were two fountains. One was white, one was colored. Well, I went like a beeline to that colored fountain because I wanted some of that colored water. And so I've been in and out of this. I think Radford is, in my view, very fortunate, and Sarah is giving us a kind of a pass, I think. We've been very fortunate. We have a university, maybe somewhat enlightened. I think we're in a sea, a continent, if you will, of bias, and the scab is being ripped off yet again. And I think this time we really need to do something about it. And it's not, I've heard a lot of people smarter than me say, this is not a black or a Latino or a Native American or an Asian problem. This is a white problem. It's us. And so I think if we're going to follow the tenets of Christianity and Christian charity, that we have to look at ourselves first. I knew about Tulsa. I grew up knowing all about that. I can remember when the United States Army was integrated. I was a dependent, and they had some maneuvers in Denmark, and I'll leave you with this story. The good-naturedness of the black soldier in those days. They came back from Denmark, and it had been in the summer, and it was real sunshiny, and all the white guys were talking about their Denmark tan. And I'll never forget, we're standing in line to go into a movie, probably to see an Elvis Presley movie or something. And one of the black soldiers danced out of the line and he said, "Man, look at my Denmark tan." And we all laughed and we all thought that was funny, and it was very good natured. But I think all of this is up to us. I don't think this is up to our black brothers and sisters and other minorities. I think it's us that has to change. And the South gets a lot of heat. Like I've said, I've been all over the world in and out of this. I taught high school in Maury High School, K. I taught in North Carolina when the high school system was integrated. And gosh, I got to tell you, we have just got to do better. We have never been the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we've got to recognize that and aspire to it, I think. And now I'm getting down off my soapbox.
And John, I would like to jump on there and agree with you fully. And this whole thing of the counter to Black Lives Matter, where people say, well, all lives matter, that sounds good. But the truth is, I don't think all lives have ever mattered in America. I don't think there's a decade that you can point to where all lives matter equally, from slavery to the way Native Americans were treated from the outset. We have to do better. And it is on us. We're the ones who have been the oppressors, and we have to figure out ways to do better. That's just me personally. You won't hear me say that a lot because some people won't like it, but that's me.
I have always had this question in my mind.
Okay.
And I hope all of you will ride with me about this. But when I think about biblical times, when I think about the Middle East, when I think about Israel, that area has people of color. Now, if you've got most of that area that's people of color, then can you explain to me how white people came out of that? And how did Europe get started, that you had those European people come over here and be superior, and they just flip-flop. And so they feel that, and it's not all white people, but they feel like they're superior over all people of color. Where did white people, culture-wise, color-wise, come from if you start in everything from there and bring it forward over to here? Who are you? No, I'm just laughing. But I have wondered that because it goes over and over my mind. How in the world did we get here? Why are we in this setting? But I can't help think, but biblically, Middle East, people of color, where did white people come from? How did that happen? You know?
Have you seen this thing on Facebook? I think it's true, but it's sort of hilarious and it gets your attention. It says, think about it. There are no white people in the Bible.
There are no white people what?
In the Bible.
In the Bible.
I have seen some controversies on Facebook about that. They're trying to figure out. They didn't talk about white people, the human race or this, that, and the other. But I haven't been able, I don't even know if it actually originated like from the Tower of Babel, when all those different tongues were talking, and they probably had to disperse, but you still were having people from the Middle East. They all were speaking one language until that happened, but they were all would have had the same skin color. So if you take all of that and disperse everybody all over the place, was there a white person created too? A white language or a white something that broke off into all of this? If I'm making any sense?
Yeah.
I guess it just, and if there are history teachers out there, you can correct me. I didn't actually teach history, but it seems to me it's a result of just who was most victorious because the ancient world was made up of groups that fought other groups to get power and control. And the Romans in Central and Southern Europe, I guess, were the most victorious, and our Western heritage comes primarily, I guess, from the Greeks and the Romans. However, there is that element of the Middle East in our heritage as well, because we as Christians are the results of a Middle Eastern man, Jesus, who was Jewish, and probably he might have been dark, who knows. He wasn't, I'm sure, white as some of us, probably. But anyway, the Romans, I guess, were the powerful ones, and from one thing to another, that's how we, and then there were those Germanic tribes that came in from the north, but golly, it's complicated.
Well, folks, our time is, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll say something right quick. We've talked about history, and we've talked about Sarah's upbringing, and we've talked about some of the other places we've been. What I want to know is, what are we doing about it today? And I want to know, is there a Black-owned business? I know we have some Latino-owned restaurants, but Sarah or any of you other people, do we have a Black-owned business that we could be supportive of to show that we really want to do something about this and support them in their efforts to succeed? Yeah. Does anybody know?
Black-owned businesses in Radford, unless I'm totally blind and don't see it. Claire?
Don't forget your mute.
There's a list, and I will find it, and I will send it to you. Black-owned businesses in the New River Valley.
Okay.
I really don't know myself where there are any.
Sarah, let me ask a last question. Do you see signs of hope in all that's going on right now in our country?
If I talk about it spiritually, I think all of this is happening because it's kind of reminds me of the grand finale of fireworks, at the end. But I think all of this is the grand finale of the end of time. And it seems like something's happening and it's like it's just coming at you bit by bit. And I think it's the grand finale of the rapture and Jesus coming. But in the meantime, I'm not really for sure if there is, I have to be honest, I'm not really sure if there is any hope if this doesn't stop.
Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. We appreciate you coming and putting you on the spot in this situation.
I'm fine.
Kent, could one last question of you, Sarah? In the beginning, you said that we as whites need to recognize or admit that slavery happened. How do we go about doing that? To whom, like me? I know all of this can start with me as somebody making a difference. and all of us individually and as a group. How do we go about doing that? What do we need to do?
Well,
to-
first of all, let me just establish something. You all didn't do it. It may have been, I don't know if all of you had family members who had slavery or not. So you would have to go into your own history and find out what you have and bring it forward and see what you would need to do. We're talking about back then a day and a time. It was out of our hands and out of your hands. So you didn't create this problem.
Yeah.
So if I'm answering your question right, the only way that I think you could do anything about it is to probably search your own family's life and bring it forward and then take it from there. And then if you accept that it happened, because slavery was never ever a good thing. But a lot of people, like I said, I think differently. There were some good slave owners, and there were some bad ones. One side of my family were slaves to John Blair Radford. That was a good slave experience. And my mother's father's people were slaves down in further west end, and they were totally mistreated and beaten. So I have accepted that my family has been through slavery. I have accepted that my family came out of slavery. I have accepted that my family accepted whites, worked for them, and established a friendship. And so I am a descendant to keep carrying it on. So I've already gone back and I've come forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that might be something that you all, if you're wanting to, or that's a question in your mind, to think, did my family have slaves? How did they treat them? What can I do? There's a whole lot you can't change.
Yeah.
You have to accept that. You can't change everything. You can't change what an ancestor, that I can't change anything that my family has done a long time ago, whether it be good or bad. I just have to start here and know that it happened because I have something to change.
Okay.
Did I answer
Sarah,
the question, Mary Ann?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Sarah, can I ask you a question? At our meetings at church, you are the only African American that I normally see there. And I will guess that at the meetings, First Baptist on Rock Road, you never see a white person there, except with the dinner meetings that we've had together.
Bible study.
Okay, my wife is saying Bible study, and I'm not sure what she means there. But is there anything that you can do through your church to get people to be comfortable with coming to our church whenever they want to? I'm not saying as a big group, but whenever they want to come down. Is there anything you can do? Is there anything we can do at our church, and Kent probably can answer this better, that we could do to be comfortable about going up to First Baptist on Rock Road for a Sunday morning worship service?
Jan, if I can interrupt you, I can go ahead and tell you that Pastor Casey from First Baptist on Rock Road and I talked last week, and he's very anxious for us to find a time when we can get together. And his suggestion was, let's get together outside of worship and without food, so that all we do is talk to each other. And I love that suggestion. I think that's really a great idea, very important. And we both understand it can't happen yet because of the COVID-19, but as
Right.
soon as we see a healthy community window for that, we are going to plan that together. So there will be a time.
I think that some of the situation is that when civil rights came about, the black and white ministers just flocked together and they helped make it happen. But since then, I don't think it's as good as it was before. And everything has to be by your leadership. And if they're not willing to merge together and help this happen, then it's not going to happen. But we have so many different ministers, so many different denominations, so many different churches that until those leaders come together and work together as a community, it shouldn't be left up to just a handful. It should be everybody. If you are classifying yourself as a Christian, if you are classifying yourself as doing as Christ says to do, then it's going to have to include everybody, because you don't want renegades running around just because they don't want to be a part of it. You want it to be a collective thing, a community thing. So I think some of the downfall is because of the leaders in the community, especially the churches. And they've got to practice what they preach.
Thank you so much again, Sarah. You got something?
I do. I just wanted to tell everyone that if you want to learn more about this, or learn more about the history of racism from the white perspective and how white people have dealt with this over the time, I highly recommend the book White Fragility. Have you heard of that? White Fragility. You can't hardly buy it right now, Sarah, which is a wonderful thing. Enough people want to read about this and learn about how we have propagated microaggressions and so many other myths about this. And it talks about racism not just as being an individual thing, but a cultural thing that we are a part of, whether we want to be or not, and how we can start changing it from the bottom up. You can certainly find the ebook in a lot of places right now. And some of you, if you're clever at looking for used books and in tiny corners of places, you might be able to find it. But it's a great book. And if enough of you get it and read it and are interested, we could have some discussion groups at a different time, not on Wednesday night, about the book White Fragility.
Were the other three people on board, or did they hear what was
I
going
think they're listening without showing themselves.
Oh, okay.
That would be my
I
guess.
kept noticing at one time we saw Gary.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
I think they're listening in.
Okay. I didn't know if they had anything.
Okay. Yeah, I think they would. Yep, there's Gary showing himself.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Before we go, I'd like to have a brief time of prayer.
Thank you all for having me.
We are very honored that you came to be with us tonight. Our prayer list is unchanged from Sunday, and there are no new updates to that. Hang on just a second. We're getting feedback again. Okay. We don't have any new updates since Sunday to our prayer list. If you do have updates, send me an email so we can know about that. But we've been on for an hour, so we're going to wind things up at this point. Let's bow for a prayer, and then we'll dismiss. Lord God, we thank you that you are patient with all of us, that you give grace to all of us, and that when we are willing, you show us our blind spots. Lord, we have all sinned in ways that are embarrassing and shameful and sometimes not even known to us. Help us to become more aware of our brothers and sisters, regardless of skin color or class or education level. Help us to look at others as you look at all of us, that we are all your creation, we are all your children. We are all brothers and sisters in you. Lord, give us ways that we can make a difference for the good in our country and in our community. Help us to see and find ways that we can share hope. Help us to be your people. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Sarah.
I got to see you. I'm gonna go back in my hiding place now. Like a mole or a groundhog.